Cool. So yeah, my name is Abhijeet, but you can call me Abby. That's what I call myself and all my friends too. And I guess you're all my friends today for my talk. Even your components need a safety net. So at Sentry, this is where I work. I help build and maintain our JavaScript SDKs. I specifically built our React one, also like our Remix one, and a bunch of other ones like this. When I'm not programming for work, I'm programming outside of it too. I'm an OpenTelemetry contributor, a member of the Node.js Diagnostics Working Group. And I used to be able to say that I was a TC39 representative with Sentry, but like I actually never accepted the GitHub invite, so I'm like the fake TC39 member can't actually participate in meetings. But I'm working on getting that back. So Sentry, where I work and where I build SDKs for, is a product that allows you to see the errors and performance problems in your production React applications. And that's really what I want to talk to you today about, like how you can find out when things are going wrong, when your React app is throwing errors, and a couple of strategies that you can use, and some of the exciting stuff that we introduced with React 19. And so hopefully you've all seen this by now. This is kind of the Sentry UI, where if you get an error thrown in your production app, you get this alongside the stack trace and useful details. But let's keep that stack trace thing in mind. It's really important to have this when you're debugging things in production, so stuff that's actually happening to your real-life users. React 19, when it was introduced, actually brought with it some really cool new error handling APIs. I'm sure most of you cared more about like async transitions or use form state, but when I saw just this section, these new error handling APIs, like this was my stuff. This is what I was all about. But before we dive more deeply into this, let's kind of think about how error handling typically worked for the longest time. In React 16, they introduced error boundaries, which you can kind of think about as try-catch statements for your components. So when components render and they hit some kind of error, like if error gets thrown or you're trying to access something on an object that doesn't exist, the component catch lifecycle for your error boundary component will trigger. And kind of then you can account for the error, set a fallback, or so on. The Sentry SDK actually exports an error boundary component. Maybe you've used it or used something like React Error Boundary, the library, which abstracts over this componented catch and then allows you to provide a fallback, which is like a really solid pattern for this. The cool thing about componented catch and error boundaries is that it provides a component stack. So in the second argument passed in, info.componentStack, it actually gives you a stack trace. It's not the stack trace of the error, but it's a stack trace of the component that threw, as well as its names and source locations of all its parent components. And this is super valuable because you can use this component stack to understand exactly where your component was rendering in relation to the error that was thrown, because sometimes you don't get the full details from error stack trace. And with the Sentry SDK, we can actually grab this component stack, because it's just a stack trace, parse it, and if it's minified, unminify it via source maps, and display it to you. I actually think we're the only ones who do this. I don't know why other kind of services don't do this either, because like React has had this component stack thing forever. So here's an example. This is like an error, real life, happened in production to one of our apps. We saw like undefined is not an object, so you're trying to access this coordinates property. It's kind of hard to understand. There's not much kind of in the stack trace that tells you where it was happening or why it was happening, right? But with the component stack, we can actually tell, hey, this was actually a line chart, and it was happening in our release adoption component. And so it's super easy for us to tell, OK, this is why this coordinates field might have been undefined. Maybe we got the types wrong. Maybe the data fetching was wrong. But this kind of narrows this down for us super quickly. So you could tell how kind of having this component stack is super integral to especially production debugging when it's not like you can run all of this locally and test things out or set breakpoints. So with React 19, we got even more brand new hooks aside from error boundaries that allow you to access the component stack without having to define an error boundary around every single component you care about. So there's two, on-uncaught error and on-caught error. This joins on-recoverable error as kind of like these three hooks for accounting for errors in React. You can kind of define your own handlers, do with whatever you want with the component stack, log it out to an external service, or kind of parse it and use it yourself. Super useful. And of course, this works with Sentry too. So we expose a new Sentry.React error handler function that you can give to on-uncaught error and on-caught error. This allows you to kind of add your own logic, like to display an error toast or kind of global error logic that you want to manage. And it'll also send the error to Sentry alongside the component stack. So this is super useful. You don't necessarily even need to wrap everything in your component with, wrap all your components with error boundaries. You can use these hooks. You'll get the component stack, and it'll just work. Unfortunately, the one thing here is that it works everywhere except for Next.js. And that's because in Next.js, they actually don't expose create root, which is what you need to kind of pass these functions to. You can also use hydrate, which is exposed from React DOM, pass those methods in as usual, and use it in the same way. So unfortunately, it doesn't work yet in Next.js. It's not exposed there. But if you're interested in that GitHub discussion that I posted, I have like this really crazy hack where I monkey patch Next.js and add proxies to make this work. I don't recommend running this unless you're really confident that something won't break. But for a lot of people, including myself, production debugging is valuable enough that you just kind of do it anyway. So hopefully this kind of inspired you to take a look at the Sentry error boundary, but also the new React 19 error handling APIs. I feel like it wasn't really, it was just a small section in that changelog, but it dramatically changes how you can architect your apps and how you can account for and record your errors. And so, yeah, thank you very much. This is a quick talk, just a lightning talk one. But you can find me kind of on Twitter, Blue Sky, or most of my open source stuff on GitHub. If you're interested in using kind of production monitoring with Sentry, you can take a look at the Sentry link. Otherwise, everything I talked about, the component stack strategies, the error boundary, the new React 19 hooks, it's all part of our open source JavaScript SDKs, MIT licensed. You could take a look, read through it. I've written a lot of tests for how all of this should work on various versions. So if you're curious about any of the individual implementations, give it a try, give it a look. Thank you very much.